Welcome to the Sales Mastery Summit. I'm Mary Pohl, your host, and with me today is Tim Wackel, leader of the Wackel Group. If you struggle getting your prospects just riveted by what you have to share at the start of your pitch, you are going to gain a lot from today's interview. Tim has really cracked the code on making presentations that engage customers and really make you stand out as someone that they want to do business with. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Mary.
So great to have you here. You really come by your expertise in what I consider an innovation best practice, in that you combine over 25 years in sales. So obviously you found success to last that long in a sales career, and also being an in-demand platform speaker and active in the National Speakers Association. You've had the unique experience to combine your expertise in both areas, and I'm sure that's a huge benefit to the clients that you help.
We'd like to believe it is, and at least we're betting on it.
Okay, fabulous. Well, I think this is going to be a really fun interview together. So can you share what are some of the mistakes that you walk into and help sales reps fix when it comes to presentations?
You know, at the end of the day, Mary, there's really, to do a great presentation, it's like two things and two things only. The first thing is you got to be able to organize your ideas.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is you got to be able to deliver your ideas. So let's just look at the first step, which is organize your ideas. What we find is, whether it's a sales rep or a sales leader or anybody in between, most folks today don't have a process for organizing their ideas. So it goes something like this. Customers ask me to come make a presentation. So I'm going to open up 3, 4, maybe 5 different decks. I'm going to pull various slides from various decks, kind of kludge them together with a transition slide or two, and then that's what I run out and deliver. And at the end of the day, there's not a story, there's not a message. It's just a bastardized deck, and you as the presenter sometimes find yourself going, I wonder what that slide means. And if you're thinking that, your customer is lost, generations ago. So it's about having a process for organizing your story. What are you doing to put your story together?
Okay. And are there some secrets to making that story really capture attention from the get-go?
There is. One of the things we talk about, one of the steps of the process is we talk about having a hook. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about having a hook, Mary, you see so many people start presentations by going, oh, gee, Mary, it's really great to be here today. And I know how busy you are. And thank you for taking some time. And people don't care. I think those first 30 to 60 seconds of a presentation, we really coach individuals to be spot on, to be provocative, to share insight, to perhaps use humor. But we want folks to come out of the box like nobody else. So instead of stumbling into the presentation with, gee, it's really great to be here, thanks so much, starting the presentation by saying, ladies and gentlemen, the reason I'm here today, we believe we can save you $1.3 million. And the good news is I'm going to talk about 3 things and 3 things only, and here are the 3 things I want to talk about. So really kind of hitting them between the eyes, letting them know that this is the purpose, this is the value in us spending some time together.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, so where is the balance in terms of designing your content and then the delivery in terms of how you really coach and help people?
We spend a lot of time coaching people on how to put together the content.
Okay.
At the end of the day, though, you know as well as I do, Mary, that the delivery is much more important.
Right.
You can take a half-baked message and deliver it with passion, and it goes a lot farther than a fully baked message delivered with no enthusiasm whatsoever.
Yeah.
But we really focus a lot of time on putting together the right message, because here's my theory, is if your message is half-baked, it's hard to get passionate about it unless you're a huckster,
Right.
And so,
confidence.
yeah, you don't have that confidence. You feel like you're kind of maybe not completely telling the truth. So when we really unpack it with reps and we say, look, here's how we want you to put the story together, and the reps have full ownership of how the story comes together, and they're 100% comfortable with the content, they can get up there and they can knock it out of the park. So we find that if you get the content right, the delivery follows.
Okay. So then you had mentioned that you take clients through a 6-part process. So
Right.
part of those steps include organizing your content, I would imagine, and then you get into the delivery. So can you kind of walk us through what that looks like?
Well, the six-step process is not exactly rocket science, but let me just kind of briefly walk you through how we think you should put together a presentation.
Okay.
The first step of the process is know thy customer. Not exactly rocket science, Mary, but we find
Right.
often that when we coach reps, when we coach executives, we'll say, hey, look, tell me a little bit about your audience. Tell me a little bit about your customer. And we get like names, titles, phone numbers, and email addresses. And it's like, well, listen, if that's all you really know about your customer, you just don't even get out of the car
Mm-hmm.
because the presentation is going to fall flat. So, step one of the process is know your customer. Why are they there? What are their concerns? What do they need to learn? What do they want to learn? What are some of the objections you're going to face? Exactly how much time are they giving you? So, it's really spending the first part of the process is really spending time figuring out who they are and what's important to them. Because at the end of the day, if the reason most presentations fail is it's this show up and throw up. And the reason we show up and throw up is because we don't do our research. So it's like, I don't know if this client's going to be interested in bananas, pears, apples, oranges, grapefruit, potatoes, salad. And so we go in there and we talk about all of it versus, hey, why don't we spend some time up front really figuring out what these people need to know, what they want to know, and then focus just on that. It'll be a better experience for them. And if it's a better experience for them, it's a better experience for us.
Okay.
So that's step one. Step two um, is we say now you got to put together something we call a presentation objective.
Yeah.
Again, when we sit down with people, Mary, we go, hey, listen, before you present, tell me what's your objective here, and we get blank stares. And an objective is made of two things: what do you want as a presenter, and what's in it for them if they give that to
Okay.
you. So as presenters, if we have a sales capacity as a presenter, what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for an order, but it's just not about getting an order. I want an order. I want a recommendation. I want a referral. I want an introduction. I want a next meeting. So I should always be saying, hey, the reason I'm here today is this is what I'm going to ask for.
Right.
But it can't be all about me. It also has to be what's in it for them.
Mm-hmm.
So a good presentation objective would be, gee, Mary, if you buy my software, I'm going to save your organization $1.3 million a year. So that's the presentation objective. What do I want? I want you to buy my software. Why? Because I'm going to save you $1.3 million a year. So when you start a presentation by telling the client, you tell the audience, look, here's the reason I'm here today. I'm going to ask for this. And if you give me this, this is what you're going to get in return. You've kind of put your thesis out there. You've put a
Yeah.
hypothesis out there. And right away, the customer's like, I'm not believing this. And when they don't believe you, that's good because now they're leaning in and they're trying to figure out, hey, where are the holes in the argument going to be? So the
Yeah.
second step is
Mm-hmm.
putting together a great objective.
I also like that approach because it's clear you're not going to waste their time. You kind of cut to the chase at the beginning, and like you said, it's not all about the what do you think of the weather today?
Yeah, yeah. So we've done our research. We know what's important to the customer. We know what we're going to ask for. That was the second step, is putting together objective. And then the third step is we tell salespeople to kind of organize all your content into three talking points.
Okay.
Um, because when you say, hey, listen, Mary, the reason I'm here today, I want you to buy my software. Why? I'm going to save you $1.3 million a year. And Mary, I got 21 things I want to talk to you about. Oh my gosh. So what we say is, look, there may be 21 things you want to talk about. I get that. But let's organize the 21 things into some big buckets. Because when that client walks out of the meeting, we want them to be able to say, if somebody bumps into them in the hall and says, what was that about? Well, they want us to buy their software. Well, why should you buy their software? $1.3 million a year in savings. Oh, really? How are they going to do that? Well, there should just be three things, three big ideas. So it's like, hey, today I'm going to talk about tools, technology, and track record.
Okay.
And see, and underneath tools, I can talk about 7 or 8 different things. Under technology, I can talk about 7 or 8 different things. Under track record, I can talk about 7 or 8 different things. But I think as presenters, we don't make it easy. We don't put it into chapters.
Mm-hmm.
We don't give them the big idea. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'm gonna share all of this with you and expect you to assimilate it after I leave the room,
Yeah.
versus saying, hey, let me help you organize this. Today, we're gonna focus on 3 things. Saving money, finding new customers, and growing hair on a bowling ball. Whatever the case may be, it's about putting together 3 big ideas.
Okay. That makes sense. And four?
4 then is, figuring out what all your supporting evidence is.
Okay.
This is what, when I look at a presentation today, Mary, most presentations today are full of nothing but supporting evidence. And it's just data, 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 data. So if we follow the process, here's what's happened so far. I've researched my customer, so I know what's important. I've set up this objective. This is what I want. This is what's in it for you. And I know what my three talking points are. Now, when I go through my supporting evidence, when I go through all my data, I go, wow, does this support the research I've done? Does this support the objective? Does this support one of my talking points?
Okay.
And if it does, I put it in the deck. If it doesn't, I get rid of it.
Okay.
So, when we see these slides that are like, oh, here's a map of the US and all the little dots are all our sales offices, nobody cares.
Okay.
So that doesn't support anything. So get rid of it. So it's about taking the data and the information we have and now putting it into one of those three talking points, putting it into one of those buckets. And then the other thing we encourage people to do, Mary, is to make the data come alive. To make the data sexy, to make it provocative. Way too often we just say numbers, numbers, numbers without putting context around the numbers. And when we put context around the numbers, that's how people remember, because we give the data some life, we give the data some meaning.
Okay. So if I hear you right, even giving background on your company and that sort of thing, you might lump into supporting evidence. And really it's only relevant if that helps prove one of your top 3 points. That's the reason you're there. Otherwise,
Exactly.
They don't really care to know about the background of your company.
Well, and that's what you see, Mary. It just kills me. Well, it doesn't kill me. It cracks me up that, I'll sit there and watch a presentation, and usually the first 4 or 5 slides are, all about me.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm here. Let me talk about me and my company. Here's a picture of my kids and my house and my car. People don't care.
Yeah.
Does that mean we never talk about our organization? No. But if if the talking points are what, how, and who, what's the problem? How are you going to fix it? And who's best qualified to help you? Oh, well, underneath the who talking point, that's where you would bring up your organization. But see, it should come at the end. We've identified the what is the problem? We've talked about how we should go about solving the problem. And when we talk about who should help you, then people don't care until they trust you, until they buy into what you're telling them. Mm-hmm. So it's about making sure everything fits into one of those 3 silos.
Okay. And how about number 5?
Number 5 then is we've talked about just a little bit earlier. It's actually at the 5th step that we tell people to develop the hook.
Okay.
See, most folks start a presentation and here's the first mistake is they turn on PowerPoint. And you realize we haven't turned on PowerPoint yet?
Yeah.
Everything we're doing, we're designing in analog. You could have a piece of paper and a pencil and do everything I've talked about so far. Do your research, get your objective, get your talking points, organize evidence. And now we say, hey, now you develop the hook. And people are like, well, why is that not the first step? Well, the reason you can't have an effective hook just yet is because you got to research your audience. You ought to know what the objective is. You ought to know what your talking points are going to be. You ought to know what your supporting evidence is. And then you can develop a hook that's going to be appropriate for that presentation. I read years ago, Mary, that really great fiction writers don't start page 1, chapter 1. They write the story. And when the story's finished, then they come back and do the first 2 or 3 chapters because they really don't know how to get it jump-started unless they know where it's going to go. And I think the same is true with presentations. So step 5 is get a hook. Get the first 30, 60, 90 seconds down that you are just rocking their world with what you've got to share.
Okay, that makes sense. And our final 6th step?
6th and final step is you got to ask them for something. Most presentations end like this. Well, do you have any questions for me? Gee, thanks. And you sit down, you go back to the office and you wait days, weeks, or months for somebody to circle back with you.
Yeah.
So the 6th step is simply asking. And what makes the ask very, very easy in this process, if you'll remember, step 2 was, hey, got to have an objective. So if I've done my research and I've got this objective, and my objective at the very beginning of the presentation was, hey, Mary, the reason I'm here today, I want you to buy my software. You're probably asking yourself why. You're going to save $1.3 million. And Mary, I'm just going to talk about tools, technology, and track record. Okay, so I go through my entire presentation. And now at the end, you know what I'm going to ask for. So at the end, I say, hey, Mary, let me wrap this thing up. If you remember 45 minutes ago when we started this presentation, I told you the reason I was here today was because I wanted you to buy my software. And I hope I've proven to you why. We're going to save you $1.3 million a year. Mary, the only thing we talked about today was tools, technology, and track record. So my final question for you, Mary, is this. What, if anything, is going to prevent you from moving forward with us right now? And you're done. You've put a full bow around it. Nobody's surprised. Nobody's caught off guard. And quite frankly, they've listened to your whole presentation knowing you were going to come back to that because you pre-closed before you ever started the pitch.
Right, exactly. Well, I can see that this is obviously a compelling layout for a sales presentation, and I can also see how it crosses over into your platform speaking world. especially keeping your messages really, down to three because that's all people can remember anyway. And, making sure that they're engaged throughout, that they know what to expect, and that at the end, you let them know what they were meant to take away from the presentation that you just gave. So it seems like there's an awful lot of parallel there.
Well, there is, and the funny thing is, it's not rocket science. I think doing a great presentation, it's a lot of common sense, but unfortunately, common sense isn't always common practice. Because when people look at those 6 steps, it's like, well, duh. But, how often do we run around and we don't take the time to really plan and prepare the presentation? And when we don't take time to plan and prepare it, we just recycle the same thing over and over again, hoping somebody will eventually break down and say, I'll buy. And that's a sad way to make a living.
So, what do you recommend to our viewers so they don't fall into that trap? Because, like you said, if we know we should be using this outline, most people still aren't. So, what's getting in their way, and what do you recommend that they do to make sure that they're instilling this best practice?
Well, I think, several things come to mind. The first one, Mary, is, what, you got to slow down to speed up. I would rather have my reps do 5 fantastic presentations a week than to do 25 half-baked presentations.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about attempts. It's about actual success. It's
Right.
not activity. It's accomplishment. So I think slow down and do a better, because what I'm suggesting is going to take time, but there's a payoff at the end. So the first thing is slow down. I think the second thing is practice, 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 practice. And what we find is when we do this for organizations is once everybody's on the same page, they start challenging each other. So check this out. If you've been through the process, Mary, and I'm your sales manager, and we're in a ride along going to a customer call, I can say, hey, Mary, I don't need to see your whole deck, but Mary, help me understand what's your objective. Mary, what are your 3 talking points today? Mary, what's your hook sound like? Mary, how did you organize your supporting evidence? So it gives people a framework to kind of encourage each other and maybe hold each other a little bit accountable as well.
I like that. So, and you can do that if you don't have your sales manager riding along, even have your spouse or, a friend kind of keep you on the hook and help you practice that as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I think if you can deliver a presentation in front of somebody outside of your industry, in other words, if you can go home and deliver it to a spouse or a neighbor or a friend, i.e. not a colleague, and they get it, then you're going to be successful. Most presentations today are it's way, way too much detail.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's like, now give them the big picture. Give them the big picture. They'll figure out the rest. More often than not, we give them all the details, but we never, we give them the trees, but we never describe the forest. Think about the forest.
Yeah, if it takes 100 PowerPoint slides to make your point, maybe you have too many points to make.
Yeah, it's PowerPoint, not Power Paragraph. So we gotta relook at that thing. That's for sure.
So how about on your speaking side in terms of delivery? What are tips that you have to, one, make sales reps calm their nerves down and also just really make a wow impact as they're delivering their presentation?
Well, I said earlier, I think practice, and when I say practice, it's like rehearse. When I first got into the professional speaking business, Mary, I jump on an airplane and, I'm in seat 21B with the exit row aisle. I know exactly where I'm sitting, and I'm flying from here to San Jose, and I'd be going through the deck on my computer and just kind of advancing it, and that little voice inside my head, oh, he is such a rock star. It's like, oh, they're laughing here, they're crying here, they're standing and applauding here. And then I would show up at the venue, and the little voice inside my head would be quiet. And so what I learned very early on is rehearsing in your head is one thing, but standing up and practicing is something completely different. So the first thing, folks, you got to practice. You've got to stand up
Out loud.
And around. Yeah, out loud, articulate, because that's where you're going to catch the ums and the ahs and all those other little disconnects.
Mm-hmm.
So rehearsing is very, very important. And the second thing we try to leave people with is have fun. Let your personality shine. A lot of folks, you'll watch them before a presentation and it's like, wow, this person's a bit of a firecracker. And then they get up there to deliver the presentation and it's like, hello, everybody, my name is Bob. It's like, what happened to the firecracker? So we really encourage reps to let their personality shine.
And how do they do that when they're not comfortable and they're not sitting around a barbecue with their buddies?
Well, and that gets back to what I said earlier. It's because they're not comfortable with the content. And that's why, Mary, our experience is if they walk through those 6 steps and they own the content, this isn't somebody else's deck, this isn't somebody else's slides, this is your story. Once we get that comfort level up, then there's a greater degree of confidence and courage that, hey, I can tell this, because there's not that fear of, oh crap, that next slide, I have no idea what that means, and I'm expected to show it to them. So it's, I guess the other thing we see is so we record a lot of reps to kind of help them see how to get better on delivery. And the one thing we find is very, very few people smile during a presentation. And they always look so serious. And the point I try to leave folks with is, look, here's the deal. When you're delivering a presentation, you want it to be successful. I get that. But there's somebody else in the room that wants you to be successful almost as much as you do, and that's your customer. Right? No customer says, oh, Mary's coming in to do a presentation. I hope she really blows today. I hope this is awful.
I hope I can waste my next hour.
Yeah. So, your customer's pulling for you. And when you get up there and you don't smile, and you're not having any fun, if it looks like it's awkward for you, it's going to be awkward for them. So, loosen up a little bit. This is not life and death stuff.
Well, and you call it go slow mainly because you do need to prepare, but really you've created a way to simplify the message that you need to deliver. So it's not so much content that you're overwhelmed with. How will I remember it all? It's 3 main talking points.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that it can scale to size. So if I show up, Mary, and I've got a 45-minute presentation, and then I discover before I start that, hey, one of the key decision makers has to leave in 30 minutes, I don't need to rework the presentation. Everything stays the same. The only thing I cut back now is some of the supporting evidence. I still have the hook. I still have the objective. I still have 3 talking points. I just don't go as deep into supporting evidence. So once you put something like this together, you can scale it for a 15-minute presentation or, a 4-hour workshop. Both works.
I like that point because a lot of times you are called on to be flexible. That what you anticipated isn't the situation that you walk into once you get there. So I like that point that you can really scale it and be flexible.
And that's important. And to be able to do it on the fly without fear of, oh my gosh, does my story still ring true? And the answer is, yeah, the story still rings true. You just don't go as deep as you needed to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a simple outline, and like you said, you can ebb and flow how deep you go into your 3 points and the supporting evidence.
Yep, exactly.
Makes perfect sense. So other delivery tips that you have, how do you, besides making it fun, how do you really, I guess, keep the attention, maybe get the engagement of your audience?
The other thing we coach reps on is to try to make it interactive. And a lot of people think interactive is, well, do you have any questions so far? Or are you guys following me? We think it's fun to bake questions into a presentation.
Okay.
And I like multiple choice questions. And so it's like, okay, hey Mary, my next slide, I got a quick multiple choice test for everybody here in the room. Let me go through it. And you ask some sort of provocative question, you give them like 3 answers. And 2 of the answers are just insanely ridiculous, right? And so people know that's just absolutely wrong, right? So who do you think your account manager next year is going to be? A, Britney Spears, B, President Obama, or C, me? And it's just a stupid example I came up with very quickly. But when you do that, people will, number one, we find audiences to be competitive. They want to win the prize, or they want to be the one to answer correctly. And then you make it really easy for them to answer correctly. And that's the stuff that gets them engaged and creates a little bit of buzz. And they walk out and, they're sharing that experience with others, which is what you're hoping happens.
Well, and I like, as silly as that example is, it's still a way to drive home if the supporting evidence is our reliability, and that has to do with the tenure of our staff. It's a fun way to deliver that instead of saying, and, our average tenure at our company is 5.8 years. Or
just shoot me.
yeah, exactly. So I can see how you could use that, provocative question style to convey your supporting evidence.
Yeah, and it makes it fun, and that way it's not just a one-way dump, and you tell people up front, hey, I'm going to have little pop quizzes throughout the presentation, and as a matter of fact, the pop quiz sometimes is a really fun way to start as a hook. A lot of times when I'm doing a platform speech, I'll use a hook where it's like, hey, we're going to do a quick round of Final Jeopardy. How many people have seen the TV game shows Jeopardy? Everybody raises their hand. Here we go. Final Jeopardy answer is $7 billion US. So now I want you to turn to one of your neighbors, one on the left or one on the right, depending which one's better looking, and tell them what you think the Final Jeopardy question is. And people just get buzzed right away because they're trying to figure out, well, which neighbor's better looking, and how do I do this, and what do I think the question could be? And it just kind of helps set the tone for a better presentation. It really does.
Well, another key to a successful platform presentation is really changing the emotional state of people often enough that they stay alert to keep
Sure.
engaged. So I like that as a way that you can do that realistically, even in a sales presentation.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, are there any areas that you've noticed where it breaks down that platform speaking just isn't the same as giving a sales presentation?
Um, I'm sure there are areas that are. But I still think even as a platform speaker, I still want people to know this is what I'm going to want you to do as a result of this presentation. This is
Hmm.
why you should consider doing it. I still want to do my research. I'd still like to just give them two or three ideas to talk about. I still want to organize my supporting evidence. So, the 6 steps, will it work for all types of presentations? I
Pretty
think so,
much.
Mary. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, my heart and soul is in the sales capacity,
Yeah.
but I think it has legs for, the platform speaker as well. I really do.
Okay. Tim, is there somewhere that our viewers can go if they really want to go deeper in this content?
You bet. You can visit the website, timwackel.com. That's TIMWACKEL, timwackel.com. All sorts of resources out there, not only on presentation skills, but on other sales skills as well. A couple things come to mind on presentation skills. We've got a paper out there you can download called Boardroom or Boardroom. 3 tips to command attention and change minds. There's a 1 hour training on demand product called Anatomy of a Lousy Pitch, the 10 worst presentation habits and how to avoid them, which is kind of a big seller because everybody's like, oh, what are the 10 worst presentation habits and how can I avoid them? So just peek and poke around, and
Okay.
I think they'll find stuff out there that for free and for a fee that I think they'll find to be useful.
Well, I imagine it's gratifying for you to see the transformations that you're able to make with clients that you work with. Do you have a favorite story of somebody that you really helped go from kind of ugly duckling, so to speak, to really a dynamite speaker?
You know, too beyond too many to really talk about. And it's not like the process. I'd love to take full credit for the process, and the process works. But at the end of the day, Mary, what we experience when we work with clients, we do a 2-day executive boot camp.
Okay.
And what happens is you come in day one with a presentation, and we've asked you to prepare like you normally prepare. Well, I think I've already made the case most of us don't do a good enough job preparing. So, reps walk in on day one, and we put a wireless mic on them and we put a camera on them, and they're presenting in front of their peers, which is a very intimidating environment. You can kind of BS your way through a customer presentation, but when you're presenting in front of your peers, you got to kind of get your facts straight.
Yeah.
And so, day one, that first presentation that we record, you just find people really struggling, and then they have to watch themselves, and the camera doesn't lie. And so that's the baseline. And I guess the magic, or what makes it magical for us, is then we get to spend 2 full days working on that presentation. So am I some sort of miracle worker? No. If you lock somebody in a room and said, hey, I need you to work on this presentation for 2 full days, they'd naturally get better. We think we got a great process and we've done it a million times. But when they do their last presentation at the end of day two, and then you look at those videos back to back, and what's fun is to play it back to back and watch the participant just beam ear to ear, because they know they've got it. They know they're rocking the room. And that's when it's fun, is when everybody else in the room is like, it's not me saying, dude, you just went from a moron to a rock star. It's their peer group going, yesterday I was wondering to myself, who hired you? And today it's like, you own the room. You rocked us. You had the right insights. You had the right information. You had a fantastic hook. Your call to action was unbelievable. And it's just great to encourage people that way. And then you can't wait to turn them loose in front of real customers, because then positive things start happening.
What kind of stories do you hear back from people?
We hear back from people a lot of stories about the hook.
Oh,
That because everybody kind of just, hello everybody, I'm really glad to be here. And we have people during the workshop, we really encourage them to kind of get outside of themselves.
okay.
And so during the workshop, right, we're not in front of customers. Some people really do some bizarre stuff, because we say, look, here's the best opportunity for you to do bizarre and get feedback from others as to whether or not it's truly bizarre. And what we find is people do things they think is bizarre, and everybody in the room's like, no, dude, that wasn't bizarre at all. That was really interesting. And so then they'll go out and they'll do it in front of a client, and they get the exact same reaction. And that's when I get
Okay.
phone calls and emails saying, I thought they'd kick me out. I thought they wouldn't laugh. I thought they wouldn't be interested. But I had them rolling on the floor in the first 2 minutes, and then the rest of the presentation was a laydown. And it's like, kind of told you so.
Okay. So when you're working with people over those 2 days, what is the hardest part for them to get over to get to be a dynamite speaker?
Yeah, I think they have a hard time when it comes to well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the content. I'll talk a little bit about the delivery. On
Okay.
the content, I think the hardest thing for them to do is to come up with the objective.
Oh,
They just don't, it's like, well, why are you making this presentation? Well, I want the customer to, I want the customer to know more about our product. No, that's not an objective. An objective is,
okay.
what do you want? What's in it for them? So they have a hard
Oh,
time really encapsulating a hardcore call to action. So on the content side, that's the biggest thing they struggle
okay.
with. And on the delivery side, it's just what we discussed earlier, is just be yourself. They get up there and they get alligator arms, they don't, hey, and it's like, no, flow, make big gestures,
Okay.
talk with your eyes, talk with your voice, feel free to walk around the room, have fun. So it's just, it's being themselves when we look at the delivery skills.
Okay.
Everybody wants to look and sound like a professional spokesperson. That's not what we're here to do.
Right. Yeah. And those professional spokespeople have years and years of practice and experience. So,
Yeah, that's why they get paid the bucks to do what they do.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I thought for me, it would have been on the content side, cutting it back because, I think, but I really have to share all of this too.
Well, and that can be difficult, but what I think happens is once you go through the process, and I only got 3 talking points, a lot of those slides don't make the cut. And here's what happens is on day 2, the presentations get shorter,
Hmm.
almost as a rule of thumb.
Good.
But on day 2, we ask everybody, so there's coaching going on within the group. We ask everybody to answer the question, was more information conveyed on day 1 or day 2? So here's the net.
Oh.
Day 2, the presentations are by and large always shorter.
Uh-huh.
And on day 2, the amount of information conveyed is always larger. And it's like, well, wait a minute. So let's see. You're going to take less time and get more information across? Sounds like a plan to me.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So, one last bit of coaching advice. How do you get people to be themselves?
Well, I guess all I can do is encourage them. I think that's something that just has to come from inside the individual.
Okay.
When we're actually doing the coaching, Mary, sometimes if somebody's just really having a hard time, it's like, hey, okay, forget, we're not going to talk about bits, bytes, and bandwidth. Turn off the projector, and I want you to tell me the story about when your firstborn child was born.
Okay.
Or I want you to tell the group about your favorite vacation as a kid growing up. And when you
Hmm.
get people kind of off topic, all of a sudden you see different parts of their personality come through. One of the other things we do is we do a drill where you have to role play, and you either have to be Colonel Jessup in A Few Good Men, right? You want the truth, right? So you either got to be that, or you get to be Dirty Harry, Clint
Okay.
Eastwood, where he walks out, hey, and all this excitement, you got to be asking yourself, do you fire 5 shots or only 6? Well, at the end of the day, do you feel lucky? Do you punk? So we ask them to either be that, or they get to be Carl the greenskeeper in Caddyshack.
Okay.
Oh, he's 455 yards out. He's going to hit about a 2-iron. So we ask people to identify with one of those 3 characters and to
Okay.
simply do that scene. And we find that sometimes helps them relax, because you got some people that do a Colonel Jessup and veins are bulging, and it's like, dude, I didn't know you had that in you.
Okay.
And other people will do Carl the greenskeeper, and it's like, you're very funny. You need to let that come through in the presentation. So it's a bunch of crazy, tricks and tips, but it seems to work.
Well, I like this when you mentioned the stories too about their personal life really helps them access their vulnerabilities so somebody likes to be around them.
Yeah. Well, and when you're telling your personal story, you're not worried about screwing up.
Right.
You're talking from within,
Yeah, it's your
and
story.
yeah, and then you play that video back, and people are like, "Wow, I'm pretty good when I talk about when my first kid was born." It's like, okay, so you can do it.
Yep.
Just need to choose to do it when you're talking about bits, bytes, and bandwidth.
Yep. So that makes so much sense because that's the same passion that they need to access as they're sharing this story about how they're excited to help somebody with their product or service. And they also want to be that same level of vulnerability.
Yeah, and I don't know that we'll ever get there, right? That your vulnerability and your emotion around the birth of a child on a scale of 1 to
Yeah.
100 is going to be 100.
Yeah.
The problem is when we're talking about our product, sometimes we're at 10.
Yeah.
So my argument would be, hey, you don't have to be 100, but can we go from 10 to 30 or maybe 50 or 60 and
Right.
and watch the results? It'll be much, much better for you.
Excellent. Very helpful. Well, do you have any final advice for our viewers on how they can really knock it out of the park and get the attention of their customers?
Like I said, folks, I think the 6-step process we do is great, but nobody thinks they have an ugly child. So I'm partial to what we do, but at the end of the day, you need to work on it. Amazon's one of the greatest gifts we've got. There are a zillion books out there on how to deliver great presentations. Don't leave it to chance. I think too many people just run out and recycle a message. Look, design the deck, own the story, deliver the story, and I think you'll make the kind of difference you'll be proud of for a long time.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks so much, Tim, for sharing this great advice with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in and investing in your own success. The Sales Mastery Summit is here to help you never stop learning from the best. Take care.